Guten Tag, I'm Rick Steves, inviting you to join us as we continue to explore the best of Europe. We're in Vienna. Later, we'll visit Salzburg with its well-preserved old town and Europe's biggest intact medieval castle. Then we head for the hills in Austria's Lake District. But our Austrian adventure begins in aristocratic old Vienna. I think this city does more to hang on to its old-world charm and love of life than any other. In this show, we'll waltz through the high-cow and no-cow wonders of Vienna. We'll resurrect Vienna's golden age under the Habsburgs. Then we'll leave the big city to tour a dazzling abbey and cruise our way down the Danube River Valley. Vienna has history at every corner. This street is called the Graben. That's German for the ditch where they piled victims of the Great Plague of 1678. This monument was built by those who survived that plague. It stands 300 years later as a reminder of the people buried beneath this street. Vienna is full of culture. And has an inspirational knack for hedonism in elegant moderation. Vienna is second to none in coffee houses and chocolate cake. Above all, Vienna is the Habsburgs. The city is littered with the remnants of this family's 600-year-long divinely ordained rule that, at its peak, dominated European power politics. From Vienna, the Habsburgs ran their huge multi-ethnic empire. The Hofburg in the center of town was their winter palace. While World War I finally ended the Habsburg rule and the last Habsburg checked out of here in 1918, the Hofburg is still the home of the Austrian president's office, several museums, and the local horse and buggy man. Even though the Habsburgs lost the empire with their defeat in World War I, they're still revered by many Austrians. Near the Hofburg, the Kaisergruft holds many of their tombs. Visiting the remains of the Habsburgs is not as easy as you might imagine. These original organ donors left their hearts in the palace church, their entrails in the cathedral, and their bodies here in this Capuchin crypt. You get a map with your ticket to help you find your favorite Habsburg. Rather than chasing down all the body parts, remember that the magnificence of this city is the real remains of the Habsburgs. The Kunsthistorisches Museum is home to the Habsburgs' huge art collection. Masterpieces from Titian to Bruegel are on display in this magnificent setting. Vienna is famous for its rich pastries. And the most famous, rich enough for a Habsburg, is the Sachertorte, a chocolate cake that defies description. In a tasty sort of pilgrimage, many chocoholic tourists make an expensive detour through this restaurant where the Sachertorte was born. It's enough to make a chocoholic pilgrim burst into song.
Het zweet breekt me ervan uit. Niemand gelooft dat. Nee, niet denken op jullie. Lekker, lekker. Ach, sorry. Ik heb hem al ingenomen. Oh, prima. Nou, mijn dood staat waarschijnlijk. Dat mag ook wel.
For a simpler break, drop into one of Vienna's legendary coffee houses. Each has a distinct personality. "300 years ago, the Muslim Turks threatened Christian Europe. They knocked on the gates of Vienna and were turned away, leaving only their love of coffee. The Viennese took to the drink and have enjoyed it ever since. Any coffee house welcomes you to enjoy an entire afternoon of newspapers for the price of a cup, and maybe a few pastries. Okay, back to locale art. We've left the city center to check out the Habsburgs' Schönbrunn Palace. This was their summer residence, their escape. Set in an enormous park, it's big. The only palace in Europe to rival Versailles. Built in the 18th century, it was the favorite residence of the Empress Maria Theresa, who expanded her empire by marrying her 16 children into royal families across Europe. The acres of formal gardens provided just the right playground for Austria's divine monarchy and their marble playmates. The palace has 1,441 rooms, but don't worry, only 40 are shown to the public. While you're welcome to wander through on your own, a tour is worthwhile. German language tours go every 15 or 30 minutes. English tours are given about hourly. I called for the schedule in advance, and we'll catch the one at 11 o'clock. It was here that the 6-year-old Mozart first tickled the royal fancies. The Habsburgs were great supporters of the arts, especially music. Just like great athletes come to late 20th century America, 18th and 19th century musicians and composers found respect and patronage in Vienna. Vienna is still Europe's music capital. Johann Strauss was the rage here 100 years ago, and you can still enjoy his music at the Kursalon in the city park. Vienna is Music con Brio from October through June, reaching a symphonic climax during the Vienna Festival each May and June. But Vienna's Summer of Music Festival assures that even summer visitors enjoy lots of classical music. Sadly, in July and August, the boys' choir, the opera, and most music companies are, like you, on vacation. Tourists will meet modern Mozarts peddling Eine kleine Nachtmusik at all the big sites. While residents prefer concerts aimed at local music lovers, these tourist concerts, complete with powdered wigs, can be fun.
What they're going to place called musical academies. They play pieces of some operas, like from Le Nozze di Figaro, right. Symphonie No. 41 Jupiter.
Ticket offices offer a more complete rundown on concerts available. The State Opera House is a must for any visitor. While the critical reception of the building 130 years ago led the architect to commit suicide, and it's been rebuilt since World War II bombings, it's a dazzling place. Wonderful tours are given throughout the year.
So this is now the costume of the Princess Turandot from the opera Turandot. This costume was made in 1926. It is entirely made of velvet. So the costume you see here is from the opera Lohengrin. It's the costume of Lohengrin himself. This costume also weighs 20 kilos, 40 pounds, and the helmet alone 4 kilos, 8 pounds. The part where we are on now is backstage. The main stage itself consists of 6 movable platforms that can be lowered down and raised up with the help of the machineries. This auditorium offers room for about 2,280 people, 1,700 on seats and more than 500 on standing room.
Vienna takes care of its starving artists and tourists by offering plenty of cheap standing room to top-notch opera and other musical performances. Now, with so much to see, how do you find your way around and discover what's going on? As I stress in all my guidebooks, head to the tourist office for help. They have lots of brochures and flyers on things like concerts and walking tours, and a great city guide. Every historic building in Vienna is clearly marked with a set of flags and a number which keys it into this handy book, Vienna A to Z. Let's see, number 160. Yes, it says Beethoven lived here while working on his 9th Symphony from January 1824 through March 1824. It's one of 23 Vienna apartments that at one time or another he called home. I guess even back then, musicians weren't ideal tenants. Like so many cities, Wien, as this town's called by its German-speaking inhabitants, was protected by a medieval wall which it outgrew. In the 1860s, Emperor Franz Joseph had the town's ingrown wall torn down and replaced by this grand circular boulevard. The ring road is 190 feet wide. It arcs nearly 3 miles around the city's core. One of Europe's great streets, it's lined with most of Vienna's top sights. The tram circles the whole route, and so should you. Just about everything of interest to us is either on or within this ring road. Like Paris has arrondissements, Vienna is divided into districts called Bezirks. Knowing what district you're in makes navigating easier. The Old Town, within the ring, is the first Bezirk. You don't need to know your Bezirks to find St. Stephen's Cathedral. It's the Gothic needle around which Vienna spins. Begun in the 12th century, it was enlarged and reconstructed over the next 800 years. Although largely destroyed during World War II, its complete restoration still shows off the hundreds of years of history carved into its walls and buried in its crypt. Kartnerstrasse, the pedestrian mall connecting the cathedral Cathedral and the opera is still as colorful and lively as the Vienna of old must have been. The Viennese appreciate the fine points of life, and right up there with its love of music is its love of eating. The city has many atmospheric restaurants. As you decipher the menus, remember Vienna's diverse empire may be gone, but this is still where strudel meets baklava. You'll find Slavic and Eastern European specialties here, along with wonderful desserts, local wine, and beer. The local taverns, called Beisel, seem to be on nearly every corner. While the courtyard is cool in the summer, the candlelit ambience inside is where you'll find their true charm. And on a summer evening, the old town is a stroller's delight as songs from its long-gone multi-ethnic empire fill the air. Another uniquely Viennese institution is the Heuriger Weingarten. It all started when the Habsburgs let the local vintners sell their own new wine called Heuriger tax-free. The wine villages are now within the suburbs, but just around the corner from the cathedral, you can have a near Heuriger experience without leaving the center of Vienna. The Gigerolstadt Heuriger can be lots of fun. Just point to what looks good and choose from many local wines. Since Austrian wine tends to be sweet, if you like your wine dry, remember the word trocken. You can order your wine by the quarter liter, ein Viertel, or if you have a big day of work tomorrow like we do, by the eighth of a liter, ein Achtel. After touring any big city, the countryside offers a welcome change of pace. We're heading out to explore the Danube River Valley. Sleepy and elegant under its huge abbey, the Danube town of Melk offers a pleasant stop after the bustle of Vienna. And Melk makes a fine overnight stop. Many travelers save money and stress by staying in small towns near their big city destinations. From a cozy nest like this, they ride the commuter train with the local workers into the urban action. We're glad we slept in Vienna in a comfortable and convenient pension, but now it's time to relax. So we're staying in Hotel First, right on the traffic-free main square, with the abbey hovering overhead and a fountain out the door. Melk's newly restored Benedictine Abbey, beaming proudly over the Danube Valley, is one of Europe's great sights. The views from its balcony are impressive, but wait till you get inside. Freshly painted and gilded throughout, it's a Baroque dream. This library is filled with precious centuries-old manuscripts and is a featured stop on the guided tours.
In the big library room, we have about 16,000 books written in the 15th, 16th, and 17th century. 90% of them are theology books. The other 10% are medical books and philosophy books. From the most valuable book of the library, I can show you only the two photographs. The edition of the Gutenberg Bible was sold to the United States in 1925. Today it is on the University of Yale. The monks sold the Gutenberg Bible to the United States because they need money after World War I for restoring the monastery. The interesting part of the ceiling fresco are the colors. This is the last original fresco of the monastery, 262 years old. It wasn't restored any time. The fresco in the marble hall was restored in 1988.
The rule of St. Benedict requires that worship take precedence over everything else. The Melk Abbey Church certainly satisfies this demand. It's a gilded explosion of meaningful decoration. The medallion quotes the second letter of Timothy. Without a just fight, there is no victory. That fight is expressed by the martyrdom of the leaders of the apostles. Peter, who was crucified upside down, and Paul, who was beheaded with a sword. The victory is expressed by the crown above the high altar. Notice the Baroque decor in the marble hall. Baroque artists were masters of illusion. The ceiling looks curved, but it's perfectly flat. This was a favorite stopping place for royalty. Napoleon stayed here twice and liked everything but the wine. The Abbey draws people from all over. Today, the local school children have turned out to welcome visitors. By car, bike, or boat, the 20-mile stretch of the Danube between the towns of Melk and Krems is as pretty as they come. Our train pass gets us on the Danube boats for free. One bicycle. And we're taking advantage of the boat line's generous bike and cruise program, which lets us rent this bike from the dock office, take it on the boat, and drop it at any dock along the river. For the price of a gallon of gas, I've got a bike for a day. The river current is so swift here that our downstream trip will take 1.5 hours, while the same stretch upstream takes 2.5 hours. The Danube is 1,770 miles long, flowing all the way from Germany's Black Forest to its mouth in Romania on the Black Sea. One of Europe's great waterways, for centuries it's been Central Europe's superhighway, shuttling Celtic traders, Roman legions, Christian crusaders, conquering Turks, merchants, and sightseers. This stretch of the Danube is called the Wachau Valley. It's been settled for over 30,000 years and is the Danube's wine road, lined with vineyards as well as castles. Savor the views as you waltz your way down the Danube. Your ticket allows you to get off along the way and catch the next boat. Here comes Dürnstein. The village below the castle is a touristic flypaper, luring hordes of visitors with its traffic-free quaintness and its one claim to fame and fortune. Richard the Lionhearted was imprisoned here in 1193. You can probably sleep in his bedroom. This is a good place to start our Danube pedal. The path is paved and flat. It's an easy ride and a good way to get intimate with some of the small villages along the way. We stopped in Wiesenkirchen. Follow the signs. You can't get lost. When you see a bike in a red border, it means no biking. The cycle track brochure I picked up at the tourist office in Melk points out the best bike path is just between the road and the river along the north bank. What a great way to explore the Danube. I hope you've enjoyed waltzing through Vienna and floating down the Danube as much as we have. And we've got much more of Austria to experience. Next, we're headed to Salzburg, which is a 3-hour train ride west of Vienna at the edge of the Austrian Alps. In Salzburg, we tour its medieval castle, make a pilgrimage to Mozart's birthplace, and drink beer from Augustiner monks. We take a Sound of Music tour, explore Austria's Commune with Nature Lakes district, learn why this village church stacks and decorates these skulls, and tour an old salt mine. And along the way, we eat lots of Mozart balls. With a well-preserved old town, gardens, Baroque churches, and lush surroundings set under Europe's biggest intact medieval castle, and forever smiling the tunes of Mozart and the Sound of Music, Salzburg knows how to be popular. 8 million tourists crawl its cobbles each year and wolf down a lot of these marzipan Mozart balls. Mozart's more than a composer. In Salzburg, he's an industry. Local entrepreneurs market Mozart. He's used to sell everything from pricey candy to fancy fragrance. Gold-wrapped chocolate liqueur, even street musicians in full costume. It seems everyone is a Mozart wannabe. Today, Mozart Salzburg is a bundle of Baroque, bursting with charm, tourists, and lots of musical thrills. Even the bell tower, rising over Mozartplatz, is musical, with its carillon chiming throughout the day, as it has since 1705. Glockenspiel. That's German for the clock that plays. Below the tower, a bubbly Baroque fountain of water-spewing horses prance to the bells as tourists stroll the square. Music fills the city each August when Salzburg's famous music festival takes over. The annual festival was started in 1920 by impresario Max Reinhardt to revitalize Austria's performing arts after World War I. Mozart's the star, but you can hear a wide range of classical and modern works. Today, all of these. Ooh. And though the city is crowded during the festival, you can usually manage to purchase day-of-the-concert tickets.
20:30.
But even if you're not here during the festival, there's still plenty of music. Over 1,600 classical performances annually in its palaces and churches. That's about 5 a day. Some of Salzburg's best music is free in the cathedral. The 10 o'clock Sunday Mass is famous for its music, and you can also hear the organ and choir practice throughout the week. This cathedral was the first Baroque building north of the Alps. In addition to the Baroque grandeur, Mozart pilgrims like to check out the 14th century font where Wolfgang was baptized. Back when this church was built, in the first half of the 17th century, the Bishop of Salzburg was second only to the Pope in the church hierarchy, and he was the local prince. And Salzburg fancied itself as the Northern Rome. The organ, built about 300 years ago, has been enlarged over the centuries. Today it has over 4,000 pipes. Baroque Salzburg, as we enjoy it today, was largely shaped by Prince Archbishop Wolf Dietrich in the late 17th century. When the old cathedral and the neighborhood surrounding it conveniently burned, he laid out grandiose plans for this new cathedral and a grand palace for himself. But Wolf Dietrich didn't live to see the completion of his plans. He lost a conflict with the Dukes of Bavaria and died in prison up in the Hohensalzburg fortress. Perched almost 500 feet above the town, it still looks plenty formidable. In 1525, during the Peasants' War, one of the Prince Archbishops held out here for several months against an army seeking an end to serfdom. The peasants gained promises of reform, only to suffer ultimate defeat and ruthless punishment. For a taste of the agony of defeat, you can visit its torture museum, a part of the castle tour.
Most of these instruments are from the castle Hohenwerfen. It's another castle in the south of Salzburg. On this side, these were different instruments for the hand and for the feet. Now, this dungeon here is about 6 meters deep. The only way in or out was only this rope here. Now, there's a little window so we can see a little bit. In the beginning, it was only dark there.
Begun in 1077 and strengthened over the centuries, the Hohensalzburg served the Prince Archbishops of Salzburg as both a fortress and a palace for almost 800 years. You can wander through the courtyards and enjoy the views.
You're so lucky. Unbelievable.
At one time, the castle battlements stretched all across Salzburg's mini mountain. The autocratic Prince Archbishops fortified themselves on this hill and over the centuries ruled their subjects with intolerance. They expelled the Jews in the 15th century and Protestants in the 18th century. Today, the townspeople have retaken their hill. It's a park, offering a peaceful break from the city below. Also up on the mountain, remote but central, sits one of Salzburg's best budget bets for lodging. The Nature Freunde House, that's Friends of Nature House, is a European version of a mountaineer's hut. It offers cheap beds, hearty meals, and a great city view. Hikers can walk from here to France and spend every night in one of these huts. Pretty civilized hiking.
May I have a little sip?
At the foot of the mountain is a place you may have seen. This cemetery has some early Christian catacombs, but lots of us recognize its Baroque arcades and wrought iron grills as the place where the Von Trapp family hid out in the Sound of Music movie. It's next door to the Church of St. Peter. 1,000 years ago, the monks of this church started a restaurant, and it's been serving sinners ever since. St. Peter's Stiftskeller, that's monastery cellar, is classy, central, not too expensive, and your best splurge for traditional Austrian cuisine. The menu is varied and regional wine is plentiful. Austria sits at the crossroads of Europe, and the food shows it. Slavic, French, German, and Italian cuisines spice the local cooking. The nearby old town streets retain the charm of centuries past. And the outdoor market bustles much as it did in Mozart's day. Fruits and vegetables share space with soft pretzels. Did Wolfgang munch candy while Frau Mozart shopped here? I bet he did. Nearby, the colorful main drag, Getreidegasse, is a classy, pedestrians-only Baroque mall. It still looks much as it did in Mozart's day, except, I suppose, for the tourists and the Mozart balls. Touristy, but delicious. Trivia. Who was born in this building? I'll give you a hint. Right, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Born here in 1756, it was in this house that he composed nearly all the works of his youth. The irony is that for all the fuss today, Salzburg virtually ignored Mozart during his lifetime. When it's time to call it a day, the Gasthaus zur Goldenen Ent is a great splurge and one of the most popular recommendations in my guidebook on Austria. The modern and comfortable rooms fit cleverly into this building's medieval-style stone arches and narrow stairs. The breakfast buffet is a traveler's delight. If you'd like to sleep in a 600-year-old building above a fine restaurant on a pedestrian-only street in the center of old Salzburg, the Goldenen Ent is it. We're side-tripping out of Salzburg today. I first took this Sound of Music tour skeptically. It was part of my research chores, but I liked it. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. Each of the very competitive companies offering this half-day tour includes a quick but good general city tour and hits the famous Sound of Music spots.
Okay, this is a big bunch of Americans. This is a slice of American history happening in the heart of Austria here, right? The Austrians have no idea about the Sound of Music. They think you're all on a Mozart tour. This is the most amazing thing. The film was never translated, simply a business decision, and I'll tell you all about how that happens later on in the tour. There's a great big castle across the lake here. Does anybody recognize it? The family home, yeah. But this is only 1/3 of the Von Trapp family home. This is the back of the house. The front of the house is a Castle Fromberg, about 4 kilometres down that way. And the middle of the house is in studios in Vienna, London and Hollywood. So it's a very complicated home.
On to the next movie location.
I tell you what we'll do. You've got to do something a little bit fun, right? By the gazebo, a little Rolf and Liesl pose here, right? You ready? No, lean back, way back.
Starstruck? Here's your chance to play the young lovers in The Sound of Music. A fun photo op.
As you can see, the courtyard here, when the bells are ringing, the Captain and Maria walked up there. You remember the gates, they were a stage shed actually, but right in the church you have the altar, the aisle and the organ that all starred in The Sound of Music.
This tour is worthwhile for the movie's fans, especially those without a car who'd like a quick and easy look at the scenic Sound of Music country. But be warned, you may be rolling through the countryside with a gang of tourists singing, all together now, "Doe dear." If the weather's dry, summertime tours stop for a luge ride. A luge is a kind of bobsled on wheels with a handbrake. It's not as scary as it looks because you control the speed. Take along your good judgment and enjoy 3 minutes of thrills on the fast track. Back in Salzburg, the tour bus drops you off at the Mirabell Palace Gardens, a great place to relax after a somewhat crazy afternoon. Remember Wolf Dietrich, the 17th century Prince Archbishop who planned the cathedral and was pretty much responsible for Salzburg's Baroque look? He put all this together for his mistress and their dozen or so children. Okay, moving along. Biking is a breezy way to beat the city's traffic and parking problems and get a little farther afield. Can I rent a bicycle, please? If you've traveled with us before, you'll remember that many train stations rent bikes. And Austrian stations give anyone with a train ticket or train pass a discount. With the bike, we can roll through some of the neighborhoods and meander along the river. Hello, Scott. Hey. Hello, Pooch. I noticed this view on the train as we came into town and had to come back. Near the bike bridge is a monastery that's been one of the liveliest scenes in town for several centuries now. The Augustiner Braustuhl, or beer hall. It serves hearty meals and great beer. This place seats 1,000. You don't need a reservation. It's like a Munich beer hall in a historic setting with a sun-dappled garden outside its beer-sloshed, smoke-stained halls. Students mix with tourists, eating slabs of schnitzel with their fingers. It brings out the barbarian in the best of us. To savor the full contrast of historic eateries, let's take a leisurely pedal back to our hotel's classy restaurant for some Salzburger Knackerl. That's Salzburg's dessert souffle specialty. The Golden Annette serves up this frothy concoction of meringue, egg yolks, and sugar over local berry preserves, and bakes it to perfection. This is gemütlich. That's the word for Austria's cozy and easy approach to life. The Austrians are experts at good living, whether it's topping off a great day with a sweet souffle, savoring its lavish high culture, or just soaking in the Baroque ambience. Mozart's Salzburg has plenty to offer. And now it's goodbye to Salzburg, as we surround ourselves with Austria's natural wonders. Wonders that have enthralled everyone from Emperor Franz Joseph to Johannes Brahms and Franz Schubert. The Salzkammergut, an area south of Salzburg, is Austria's commune with nature country. Idyllic, majestic, but not rugged, it's a gentle land, rich in hiking opportunities, storybook villages with inexpensive lodging, forested mountains, and clear lakes. On the Hallstatt Sea, every arriving train is met by a boat which ferries travelers over to the village of Hallstatt. Sometimes in August, tourist crowds trample much of Hallstatt's charm. But a little peace can always be found for an overnight stay. The Gasthaus Simone's antique rooms and lake views fill the bill. Zimmer mit Blick. That means room with a view. Worth asking for. People come here to relax, nibble, wander, and paddle. Guten Appetit! Prost! Sunday mornings, the locals lay out a funky little flea market. Hallstatt is so tiny we can walk through it in 10 minutes, but it's got a significant past going back centuries before Christ. The humble prehistory museum has a handy English brochure which tells why this town has an entire archaeological age named after it. During the Hallstatt period from 800 to 400 BC, this was the important salt mining hub of the Iron Age Celtic culture which reached all the way from France to the Balkans. Salt, a vital food preservative, was white gold, and this area's Celtic tribes prospered through their control of the salt trade. From here they spread the use of iron into Western Europe and the British Isles. Their geometrically decorated vessels and tools survived 2,500 years later. With the salt and the iron came a society that began to tame the forests and organize into communities. The museum doesn't have all the artifacts. The Janu Sports Shop recently dug into some ancient history, and now its basement shows off the find.
An die alten Bauwerke angepasst.
So I think they were digging to make their shop bigger, and they discovered this Roman stuff, and they dug below that and they found pre-Roman stuff going back centuries before Christ. The mines continued to be important over the millennia. Several mines in the Salzburg area give tours. Hallstatt's is as good as any. Ride the underground train and learn how they got the precious salt out of the mountains. Back when salt was more important than just another way to make popcorn interesting. Visitors put on the old miners' clothing. Everything is done as the miners did, including the exciting banister slide from one level to the next. The upper levels were mined by the Celts. The deeper you go, the more modern the enterprise. The caverns are dug out and flooded. After sufficient salt has leached into the water, the cavern is drained and the salt removed. Even today, salt mining remains important in this area. Okay, back down to our village. A hike up this covered stairway near the dock takes us to Hallstatt's town church. But this is no ordinary village church. This richly decorated 15th century building reminds us of the past wealth of this tiny place. The dual high altars, dating from the 16th century, were paid for by rich salt families. Prosperous salt merchants invested in its spiritual center. Saint Barbara, on the right, is the patron saint of miners. These scenes depict the life of Mary. St. Lawrence is the patron of salt workers. As beautiful as the church is, the cemetery is more memorable. The steep hill makes space so limited in Hallstatt that for centuries, bones got only 12 peaceful buried years before making way for the freshly dead. The result is this chapel of bones. Each skull is lovingly named, dated, and decorated, with the men usually getting ivy and the women mostly roses. This practice ended in the 1960s, about the time the Catholic Church began accepting cremation. The crowded cemetery seems strangely fitting for this tiny town bullied onto its ledge between a selfish mountain and a swan-ruled lake. And that's it for Austria. We visited the ghosts of the Habsburgs in Old Vienna, toured the beautifully restored Baroque Abbey at Melk, retraced the footsteps of Mozart in Salzburg, and discovered the real Sound of Music country. So long. Farewell. Auf Wiedersehen, goodbye. I'm Rick Steves. Happy travels.